Hey guys, yeah, just wanted to talk for a minute or so about a chap that I met at the weekend, John Romero, who is just a complete gentleman and yeah, really nice guy. Him and his wife were absolutely awesome. I met them at the Blackpool Play Expo 2022, and just a really, really top guy. I got talking to his wife for a bit as well, who was talking to me a little bit about them relocating to Ireland. I think she'd got some sort of grant or something to go and study. I think it was basically something around like the video game industry in Ireland, which is pretty cool actually. But yeah, I got talking to them both for a little while, and as you'll see from the video, their interview in Blackpool was really good, quite insightful. If you're not aware, John was responsible um, for some of the games that were released in the early 90s, right up to modern day, really. But classics that I grew up with, or the main one was Wolfenstein 3D, and that was the one that I really wanted to go and sort of talk to him about and ask him a ton of questions about and whatnot. He was also responsible for what then went on for the likes of Doom and Quake and beyond, and a lot of games sort of imitated that, tried to push the boundaries with what was doable in or with similar engines, like the Doom engine and whatnot. But he's kind of credited with a lot of the first person shooter type games because of how successful his earlier games were. Anyway, here's the video. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks ever so much. Enjoy.
John, can you tell us what was your very, very early experience of video games, and did you play the arcades on a regular basis?
Yeah, getting into video games, I was actually playing in pinball arcades before video games came out. So this is in the 70s. And I remember when across from the pinball, like there was a wall of pinball machines, probably about 30 pinball machines in a row at this place in Tucson, Arizona. This place is called Spanky's, and it was dark and it was cool, and pinball and all the noise and stuff. And one day there was this machine that they put on the opposite wall, and it was called Doom Buggy, and it was an electromechanical machine. It wasn't video yet. So when you looked inside of the cabinet, which was pretty big, there was actually physical terrain there with like a dune buggy on it, and it was all black lit, so it's fluorescent paint, and it was just super surreal. And it was really cool to play that game. It was like, and then right next to it, pretty soon comes video games, Space Invaders, and there was a game called Targ that appeared there. And as soon as I saw, a video game, I was like, okay, this is really cool. This is cooler than the pinball machines. And I played games in the arcade for years after that.
I think there's kind of two types of video game fans. There's people like me who are completely non-technical, and we just consume games, and then there's guys who like to tinker. Can you talk us through what inspired you to start tinkering?
Well, the funny thing is, I love playing games, and I never thought that I could actually make them. But this is like the weirdest story, but when I was 11, my friend came to my house in the summertime. He comes home on his bike and he says, I found a place where we can play games for free. And I'm like, no way, oh my God. So I got on my bike and we rode together up to the local college. And we went to the computer lab there, and there's almost no one in there. There was a couple students, and I would go into this room. There's about 20 terminals connected to a mainframe in another room. So this giant computer fills the room, and so I'm just like, oh wow, neat. Okay, so let's play some games. And he was basically showing me these text games on the computer, and they had nothing to do with arcade games, and they had nothing to do with graphics or sound. But they were really different, and I didn't have to like hurry up, and I didn't have to put money in. I could think before each turn, and that was really another, wow, this is amazing. So when I got to play Adventure, the original Colossal Cave Adventure on there, then it was like, oh my god, this is amazing. So, and I was then at some point thinking, what are these students doing? And he said, well, they're programming. They're programming the stuff that you've been playing. I'm like, you program games on these things? So he said, yeah. And I started asking the students what they were typing in, and it was BASIC. They were programming in HP BASIC. So I started to write down all the words and use them on another terminal to just learn how to program in BASIC. And I kept asking them. Eventually, they give me a book, so I don't ask anymore. And then I could just learn. As fast as possible how to program in BASIC and start making like really basic adventure games and stuff on the mainframe. And it took me probably 3 years of going to the college in the summer where I would get kicked out and going to the local computer stores in town that had Ataris and Apple IIs, etc. Until 3 years later, my parents finally got me a computer at home, so then I didn't need to go outside anymore.
According to a certain factual website, your first commercial gig was with Origin Systems. What systems and games did you work on?
So Origin Systems was the company that made the Ultimate series of games, if you remember those. I got my first industry job in '87 at Origin, and I loved their games for years. And when I thought about which company I would want to work at, Sierra was one of them, Origin was one, and there was another company called Sirius Software that on the Apple II had made a lot of really fast arcade games. So in 1987, I went to a trade show called Apple Fest, and when I went in, and basically right in front of me was a booth for a company called Uptime that sold disc subscriptions. So you get a disc in the mail, and every month you would get just a collection of rando stuff. And I used to sell them games all the time. So when I went into this big Apple Fest, there's a bunch of people playing my game in their booth, which was really a pretty good omen. The owner of the company offered me a job. I'm like, okay, interesting. And then I went to their competition, who then they also were interested. And then I'm walking around and I saw Origin's booth, and I was like, oh my god, I have to get it. I went to this show to get a job. I didn't go there just to look around. I brought all my discs with me. So I went into the Origin booth, and I saw that they had Ultima 5 running on, it was still in development, it was running on some Apple II computers in there. And they had one computer that had Ultima 1 on it that had been rewritten in assembly, because the original was in BASIC. So I just popped the disk out, and I put my disk in, and I rebooted their computer. And the marketing person came over. I can't believe I did this, but the marketing person came over and was like, "What are you doing?" and I said, "Check it out." And she saw my game, and she's like, "Wow, okay, those graphics are really good." And I said, "Yeah, that's my game. I make games. I make tons of them." So she wanted my information, and I said, "Can I have your business card?" Which was actually the critical thing. And I kept on calling them until I finally got a job. I had to take a test over the phone and everything, but still, I pestered them into a job.
So, did you do graphics and can you code yourself then, John?
Yeah, back then, as a programmer, you have to do your own audio and your own graphics and, code up, and I was working on porting 2400 AD from the Apple II to the Commodore 64.
So, do you walk in an arcade and go, oh, quite like that year coming through, I think I'll just code that myself?
Well, I mean, I guess at that time, it wasn't a problem taking somebody else's game and just porting it. I kind of understood assembly language really, really well. It was like I spoke that better than the English, probably. But yeah, it was a really fun job.
So after a number of years, apparently you went on to co-found a games company called Inside Out Software. Is that correct? And what prompted you to sort of go it alone? So go it alone, so to speak, rather than working under a corporation?
Yeah, so what happened was is this working? Okay. I was at Origin, and my boss, he wanted to leave and start a game company. And he asked me if I would go found the company with him. And I'd only been at Origin for, I think, 7 months, 8 months, something like that. And I'm like, hell yeah, that'd be awesome. Even though I loved Origin and it was my dream job, for some reason this was going to be really exciting. So So I said, yeah, and I basically left Origin, started a company called Inside Out Software with my previous boss, now my co-founder, and in our first thing, this was like us doing porting contracts until we could do original games. So we started porting. We did Might Magic 2, and he ported it to the PC from the Apple II, and I ported it to the Commodore 64 from the Apple II. So if you played Might Magic 2 on the Commodore 64, that's my port. And so I basically did that game, then I worked on another game over here. It was called Nebulous. It was called Tower Toppler in the United States. But I was porting that game from the Commodore 64 back to the Apple II, and then the 8-bit industry crashed while I was doing that in 1989. And as soon as it crashed, I'm like, I need to learn how to program the PC. So I was at my startup only for maybe 9 months. And then I was like, I need to leave and go basically learn the PC as fast as I can.
So you later co-founded a company called Ideas from the Deep, I didn't know, didn't you? Before moving to Louisiana in 1989. And you joined Softdisk as a programmer working on a PC monthly disc magazine. After a short time, you moved into a game development arm called Gamer's Edge. When you went on to recruit a certain Mr. John Carmack, can you tell us how this came to be?
Yeah, I was working at so when I left that startup, I started another company called Ideas from the Deep, and then I only made a few games there before starting working at Softdisk, which was in Louisiana, which is not a video game capital anywhere. It was basically like the Uptime stuff, where you basically buy, you have a subscription, and every month you get a disc full of stuff. That's what Softdisk was. I got tired of doing that after, I think it was a year, a little over a year, and I was done doing this. So I basically have to ship something every month. Usually it's a utility, sometimes it's a game if I'm lucky, but it was because it's only a month. Making a game in 1 month and shipping it is not very fulfilling because you can't make a really great game. So what I was doing was porting my Apple II games over to the PC. So I already knew the PC really well by that time, and I told the president of the company, I'm going to go work at LucasArts or something because I need to actually spend time making games. And so he said, please don't leave. We'll start a game disc. And I said, okay, how about instead of shipping something every month, how about if I ship a game every 2 months and I have a team of people, like maybe 3 other people, maybe there's 4 of us. And he said, okay, let's do that. And so I needed to hire a programmer and an artist. The 4th person was going to be like the manager person to deal with the connection of our product to the rest of the organization. So I needed a programmer and an artist. I went into the next room, and which is like the art room where the artists do work for the whole, like every disc that they have there. And he promised me I would get my own artist. So I'm like, this is great. I said I have to have my own artist. I can't have a room full of people doing stuff. I need them in the room with me. So I saw a guy with long hair out of everybody, the only one. And I was like, hey, so what's your name? You know, he's like, my name's Adrian. I was like, you like metal? He's like, yeah, I listen to metal all the time. I'm like, good, we're gonna get along with each other. Hey, what do you think about making art for video games? And he's like, well, that sounds cool, as long as my boss says I can do it. So I just went to his boss, who was running the art staff, and just said, hey, you know, would you mind if I take Adrian and have him in the next room, just making game art? And so he's just like, okay, yeah. Then the next month, go ahead and take him. And Adrian had only been working that month on a computer, so he'd never actually done game art or any art really. He was learning how to use VGA and EGA, you know, 16 color mode and stuff. So he came into the room, and I also needed a programmer. And I made so many games back then. I would go home from my job and make games. So I would make games at work, and then go home and I'd make even more games, and I'd sell those games. And one of the games that I had done at night, I sold back to the company Softdisk because they have other, they have Apple II discs still, and I was doing PC stuff. So I would sell my games to them, the Apple II games, and the latest disc that I was on had a game from a guy named John Carmack, and it was a game called Tennis. I had a game called Substalker, and his was Tennis. And it was a really, really good tennis game, which is, normally you would not get excited about tennis on a computer, but he did a really good job programming it. So I could tell that he was a great programmer just from watching his code run and watching the game run. So I asked the Apple II guys who were in touch with them, hey, can I get in touch with this guy? I'd really like to hire him. And they said, forget it. We've tried to hire him twice. He's not interested. And I said, I want to hire him just to make games all day. I think he'd be interested. Can just get in touch with him. So they did. And he said, okay, I'll come down for an interview. So that kind of, they were just like, what? Okay, this is great. He came down, and I brought my friend Lane, who was inside of our group, when we came to Softus. Lane came with us. He's an expert level assembly language programmer. And so when John came down to meet with us, it was like he found his brotherhood. Like he never talked to anybody that knew a lot about programming on a computer. So he immediately wanted to join the company. So I hired him into Gamer's Edge, and that's when we started making stuff.
Obviously, this coming together of great minds eventually led to the formation of, is it ID Software or is it
id Software? Not ID.
Right. id Software, which led to obviously landmark games and genre-defining titles like Doom 2, Doom 3, Doom 4, Doom 5, Heretic, Hexen, Quake, etc., etc. But prior to the game changer that Doom was, we published a game called D.D. Wolfenstein. I always remember my mate throwing me in a PC. PCs were crap, and then he showed me this game. I'm like, wow.
Oh yeah.
I was a C64 fanboy, and one of my favourite games was Castle Wolfenstein, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, by a certain sadly late guy called Silas Warner. Am I right in thinking that was that the inspiration?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Castle Wolfenstein was a classic game on the Apple II.
I mean, it had speech and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, Silas was really early. He's a 70s programmer, and he started Muse Software in Baltimore, Maryland, and he programmed all kinds of utilities, like utilities to record your voice and play it back, and he made lots of games himself. But he, like in 1981, he made Castle Wolfenstein and published it. He made other games as well, but this was just like, what a magical game that he made. And it was actually the first stealth game ever made as well, because you have to be stealthy in that game and hold people up and take their uniforms and pretend that you're that you're an officer. So anyway, he was such a amazing programmer, super creative person. He was also 6'7", so he was really tall. But he just changed the world with that game, and so we grew up with it.
Did you get to meet him too?
Yeah, we got to meet him. The weirdest thing was, like, we made Wolfenstein in 1992, and because we were Apple II people, even though the Apple II was kind of dead and buried, and we're programming the PC, we would still go every year to an Apple II conference in Kansas City that's called Kansas Fest. For some reason, it's not called Apple II Fest anymore. And we would go every year, and every year they have people from, that might be from Apple, they might be people who had made games in the 80s. And when we, in 1992, when we finished Wolfenstein, we bought the first color laptop that existed. It was a Toshiba laptop. We brought it with us down there with Wolfenstein on it, so we could show our Apple II friends that we made Wolfenstein again, but in 3D on a PC. And then we find out that Silas Warner is the special guest that year, and he's going to be giving a talk about Muse Software, the history of Muse and Wolfenstein and Supertext and everything that he had written. And so we were in there listening to him talk, and the audio of him talking is on the internet. So they recorded it in 1992. It's just the audio, and so we got to talk to him after he got done giving his lecture. We got to talk to him. We had him sign our Wolfenstein manual. We showed him the game, obviously. He thought it was really cool. And then later that night, he hung out with us in the hallway, just talking for hours with other programmers.
So that was like your John Romero moment, getting to meet
It
this
was
guy.
incredible. It was incredible to be able to talk to Silas Warner and just spend hours with him talking about assembly language.
So, back in the day, I was a staunch Amiga fan, and the 386s and 486s were gradually kind of coming into houses. They were still pants as far as I was concerned. But that all changed when I went up to one of my mates' houses one day. He'd sold his Amiga, he'd got this PC, he says, "You need to come up and see this game." And I can still remember going up the stairs, and I could just hear this noise, what I described as like the gates of hell, with roars, screams, booming growls. When I went into the room, I saw this behemoth 20-inch CRT, and my jaw just hit the floor, and it was Doom. And needless to say, the next day the Amiga was up for sale, and I was going to get a PC. It was mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, Doom, it literally defined the first-person shooter, which has now become the mainstay of any systems. And obviously one like multiplayer. Did you have any idea of the impact it was going to have at the time? Did you know this was going to blow people's minds?
We actually did. Sorry for the Amiga death, everybody. There are some Amiga history books out there that do blame Doom for the death of the Amiga, which is a whole, there's an interesting story of R.J. McCall who killed one of my games, so I kind of killed his system. Yeah, it's funny. We knew Doom was going to be, a great game because we planned for it to be a great game. We'd already made Wolfenstein and Spirit of Destiny, and everybody loved those games. They were super fast, super violent. It's a new kind of game that people hadn't played before. But we knew that with Doom that we were making something no one had even seen before, with the kind of architecture that we could make with lighting and the sound effects and just the spookiness of the game. So you probably don't remember this, but in January of '93 we put out a press release saying that Doom was going to be the best game ever made. And we just started working on it. We had a bullet point list that said what was going to be in it, and we knew that we could make it happen. Part of it, like one of the most, important things on that list was that we called it an open game, which means that people can mod it. We're going to make the game easy for people to modify, so you can make it your own and do whatever you want with it. Make new levels, you can make new graphics, sound, you can make it look like something that's not even Doom. And people immediately did that when the game came out. But deathmatch for the first time, you can do high-speed co-op or deathmatch with each other. Like, people had never done that before. If they had done that, it was back in the late 70s or early 80s with modems that were turn by turn, but nothing at that speed. Nothing that was high speed, especially nothing that was a first-person game. So, we knew it was going to be really cool. We put everything into it. We basically said we have to make the best game that we can think of ever playing when we're making it. We didn't know it was going to last this long, because usually when we make the next game is supposed to ruin the previous game. So we knew Doom was not long for this world in our minds with Quake. But it lived.
So you're putting this game as being the best game ever, even though you hadn't even written it. I take it you know Peter Molyneux.
It's crazy.
Have you any idea how many copies of Doom have been sold across the world?
I have no idea. Millions. Not sure. More have been downloaded, probably. Yeah. Which is legal if it's the Shareware version.
I can quite honestly say I've never played a game since Doom which utterly terrified the audience. I mean, the demonic, utterly terrifying enemies. Were these pulled together collectively as a team or one person? I mean, whose idea was it to come up with this?
So Tom Hall was the original designer on Quake Doom. Sorry. So he wrote the Doom Bible in November of '92 before we made the game. And he had a lot of, character ideas in there and level ideas, and there was a lot of stuff that he put in that Bible that eventually we didn't keep, but we did keep a lot of the high level ideas. Like, there's going to be several levels that go through this base on Phobos, and so some of a lot of those ideas were there at the very beginning. what the characters looked like came out later, you know, as we were developing, because he didn't draw all those pictures. But, you know, our team was really small. We only had 5 people making Doom. That's just me and John programming it, me and Tom designing, and Adrian doing the art on it, and Kevin Cloud doing the art. So 2 artists, 2 programmers, 2 designers, but I'm doing code and design. And so, you know, it was us 5 until Tom left in August, because that was not a game that was a Tom Hall game. Tom is Commander Keen. He's like Mario. He makes happy, fun games. And Wolfenstein was like very violent, and then Doom was just like even more, you know, dark and violent. And so it wasn't his cup of tea. So he decided to leave, and we brought in Sandy Peterson, who was a really great game designer. He made Call of Cthulhu, if anyone's remembered that. And then we brought in Dave Taylor, who was just out of college. He's a really fast, you know, programmer. And so he was, you know, then we went up to 6 people. And then we shipped the game probably about 5 months after they both joined. But yeah, it was ideas originally with Tom, and then a lot of ideas from me and some from Sandy, and also we worked with the artists to like come up with what would be a cool thing that we could do now. Like the way that we were making the characters in Doom, we started out making them in clay. So we made clay characters, and we used a video camera to shoot frames and rotate them on a table and then animate them. And so we did this, it's called rotoscoping. So we did that. The problem with clay is that it tears when you animate it. Luckily, we only made a couple models of, you know, in clay, and then we had a Hollywood monster maker create the actual characters, you know. And so the first one he delivered to us was the Spider Mastermind, which is the episode 3 boss. Any other characters he made were for Doom 2. So the other characters in Doom 1, we were just the artists were creating them on the computer in Deluxe Paint. You know, by hand. So we didn't have too many scanned characters in Doom 1, but we had a bunch of them in Doom 2 scanned in.
I think it was absolutely phenomenal, and you could say that about any kind of game, but if I remember rightly, when I first installed Doom on my PC, it was like 14 meg. I mean, 14 meg, you can't even download a costume for a character nowadays, it's just ridiculous. Doom, I believe that was one of the first games to sort of embrace the shareware ethos, wasn't it?
Well, it was. All of our games had been shareware games. Doom came out in the end of '93. Our first shareware game came out at the end of '90, and so we made Commander Keen, the first trilogy. You know, the first episode was out in December 14th of 1990. Then we made another set of Commander Keen games, and December 15th of '91 was Keen 4. Then we do Wolfenstein, and we put that out in Shareware as well in May 5th of '92. And then Doom was our next Shareware game. And what we did was we kind of did a Shareware game and then followed it up with a retail game. So we maybe put a game out there and then we put one in retail on the shelves. With Doom, the thing that was really different was we realized, like, hey, not everybody has a modem that they can download a Shareware game with. We need to get this in stores. And we put on the title screen of Doom, suggested retail price $9. And our intent was we could basically to get people to put Doom in the store and not charge more than $9 for just that shareware version. Because if it was too much, then they might not register it. Because now how much does this game cost? $60 or something? So we contacted all the companies that were in the shops putting stuff on the shelf and said, you can take this game, you can put it in a disc or a CD, put it on the shelf, and you don't pay us anything, and you could just make money off of it. Just get it in the store. And so many companies did that. So you could actually go into a computer store and see 10 copies of Doom on the shelf, all with different covers from different manufacturers with the same game in it. So that was really unique. But it was something that we did to just get the game out there. So people were used to going to stores, buying discs, and and going home, and it was like, wow, $9, all right.
I think it's fair to say you succeeded in what you were trying to achieve. I mean, Doom's obviously evolved in various incarnations over the years, you know, versions of the Xbox Series X, etc. But in my personal opinion, I don't think anyone's come close to the terrifying spectacle of the original first one, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, the PC.
But I would include Doom 2 in that as well. Apart from the genre, it's pioneered Doom also laid the foundation for the weapons. The weapons that you see in every game now. You've got your handgun, you've got your shotgun, chainsaw, BFG, what does that stand for? Do you know what that stands for? I have no idea. Oh, so it's not true then. What was the inspiration behind these weapons? Because you didn't have anything that had gone before, because you were writing, you were laying the
Yeah,
laying the path.
we did with Wolfenstein. We did have a chain gun, which we didn't put in Wolfenstein, but we put in Doom. We had like a machine gun, which we actually were planning on putting in Doom, and we took it out because we thought that shotgun would be cooler. And a pistol, and Wolfenstein had a knife, but we had a fist. Fist for punching, and then a chainsaw. You could alternate between those two if you had a chainsaw. But all those weapons were just like, we need to make weapons that are really cool, they have to sound cool, and the challenge with Doom, with the weapon, because we actually spend more time on Doom, the challenge was every new weapon that we put in the game needs to not remove any previous weapon. It needs to be additive. And with Wolfenstein, if you had a gun, you would never use a knife. If you had a machine gun, why would you use a pistol? And if you had the chain gun, why would you use anything below that? Unless you were almost out of ammo, and you had to be very careful. So Doom, every weapon, there were usually two weapons that shared the same ammo, and each of those weapons was for a specific purpose, and neither of them removed the purpose of any other weapon. So like a plasma gun using a plasma gun does not get rid of the chain gun. You could run out of plasma cells and you need to use the chain gun, right? Chain gun is really good for long distance shots. The regular shotgun is better at long distance than the double barrel. The BFG is for clearing out a room. The rocket launcher is great for collateral damage. So they all have different uses, and they're all very useful. If you have all of them, you want to use all of them. Versus in Wolfenstein, you just want to use a chain gun. So yeah, it was a challenge to make a game where all the weapons would stay with you. You always use them.
Obviously, Hexen and Heretic followed Doom, and they were more sort of like magic kind of based. How well received were these compared to the Doom games?
Yeah, Heretic and Hexen were really, really well received. They, there are some people like Heretic better than Doom because they just love medieval stuff. They love the music, they love the characters. They're just like people that love D&D, and this is like back then. This was like a really great D&D game, action D&D. And then Hexen was a more complex, very tough version of Heretic. And introduced the idea of, in a shooter, of having a hub level system where you kind of go in and out of a hub, and every time you come back, the hub changes and opens up eventually to the next hub. And it also had character classes, so you could play through the game as a cleric or a mage or a fighter. So I was just experimenting with design in the FPS, but doing it in the medieval realm with Raven software. And it went really well. Activision bought Raven because of those games. So they bought the company, and Heretic was the first, and Hexen was the second, and I was making the third in the trilogy. It was called Hecatome, but I left it before we'd even gotten 4 months in. But when Activision bought Raven, they just made each one of those games their own brands. So there was a Heretic 2 and there was a Hexen 2. But yeah, those were really good games.
I think it's fair to say that 99% of games were massive successes. Can we just talk about Daikatana? Daikatana.
Yes.
What happened there?
Daikatana. Who wants to know about Daikatana? All right. It was good. So, my memoir is coming out in July of next year. The Ion Storm section's at least 3 chapters, I think. Right? Yeah. tells the whole story of what happened with Daikatana. It basically comes down to a lot of shenanigans were happening at the company with co-founders and other people that I brought in that made it really hard to concentrate on being able to make the game. And also, I brought in a lot of people who this was their first job in the industry. Even though they knew how to make levels or they knew how to program, it was like this was a new kind of job for them. So they kind of had to learn how to make the game. And it took a long time to just teach people how to make a game. So on my team, the Daikatana team, I was the only person that had ever made games. And Daikatana was like game number 90 something for me. For them it was 1. So it was a lot of time spent teaching people and also just dealing with all the fires in the company. But you know, we did get the game out. It took 3 years to do it. I was on my 5th lead programmer. 4 of them had left before then. You know, it was a lot of work getting that game done. But we, you know, IDOS was our publisher, and they really stood behind us with all of the craziness going on. They trusted that something was going to come out. Luckily, Tom Hall, who was my co-founder at Iron Storm, he was making a really great game called Anachronox, and so that game was good. It didn't critically do well because IDOS didn't really like advertise it much because they thought that Dallas Studio just wasn't going to do really good work after Dominion and Daikatana came out. But luckily, I brought in Warren Spector years earlier, and he made Deus Ex, which saved everything. And after I left Iron Storm, you know, he still the company was around for another 4 years making Deus Ex sequels. So yeah, it was a really tough game to make. But the story is coming out not too long from now.
Thanks for telling us. Obviously, after Doom came out, it wasn't long like any of these. When somebody brings along a new game mechanic, it's not long before the competition latches onto that, and there was various games. Obviously, Duke Nukem was one of them. Was there any like games from the competition that particularly impressed you? And you think that's a good game?
Most of them, yeah. A lot of those games, like because we had the engine, like we had the Doom engine. We could get games out faster using that technology, but I wanted to play more games than that. So we had come out with the Doom engine, with Doom, so we had this Doom engine. That's when I got Heretic started. So during 1994, we get Doom 2 out, and we get Heretic out. In the meantime, LucasArts is making Dark Forces, which was unbelievable. And in November of 94, I was at CES, I think in Chicago, we just had a booth there from GT Interactive, and I was sitting there just answering questions about Doom 2. You know, it was out, and it was gonna, you know, people just wanted to know where they could buy it and all that. And some people from LucasArts came over, and they wanted to show me this really cool game that they had. So I took off, and I went over to their booth, and they showed me a prototype version of Dark Forces running, and it looked amazing. And I was just like, I can't wait to play this game. It looks so good, and I love Star Wars, and you know. And it came out in March. It wasn't even that long. You know, probably like 5 months later, it came out and did really, really well. And I love Dark Forces. Duke Nukem 3D was amazing. You know, it came out months before Quake, but it was probably one of the best games of that era, of that 2.5D era. You know. Outlaws was awesome. Blood was awesome. Outlaws was, I don't know, anyone heard of Outlaws? Yeah. Really, really great game. Cartoon style, you know, graphics and cinematics and all that stuff. Really good story. Strife was another one. Anyone heard of Strife?
Yes.
All right, cool. First RPG FPS game. But that was being developed on the same floor as us as well. We brought a team down from Illinois to develop Strife using our new engine. But yeah, those were probably some like my favorites at that time. Blood was really, really fun. Yeah.